Welcome everyone on this new episode of Let's Talk AI. Super happy to be here. Today we're with Agostino Calamia. Agostino, how are you doing?
All good. Doing fine. How are you?
Very good. Super happy to be here today with you. We're going to talk a lot about a lot of things, mainly data, AI, books, career, growth, learning, love, all of that. So first of all, maybe for the people who might not know you, could you introduce briefly yourself?
Yeah, sure. As already mentioned, my name is Agostino Calamia, and most people refer to me as Tino. So whoever wants to refer me as Agostino, feel free. Otherwise, Tino. And I'm currently senior data scientist at Shopify, and have a few projects on the side. One of them is, for example, that I am also Z by HP Data Science Ambassador, which is a program by HP to basically spread the word about data science in the tech world even more, and a few side projects on my own where I try to create content around ethical AI, MLOps, things like that.
Mm, awesome. And we'll get into all of that, the
Yeah.
side projects, your role at Shopify, your previous roles. Uh, that will be very interesting. And I was really looking forward to learn from you today. So thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
So first question, maybe I always like to ask this at the beginning. Um, you mentioned that you're right now doing side projects. You've just published a book that we'll talk afterwards. But uh, my first question would be, what are you trying to achieve today in the field, or your main vision right now?
Yeah, I think data science is obviously a fast changing field. I don't know if you compare it to what it was back then when I started, like a couple of years ago, compared to now, it's changed completely. And
Mm,
what I would like to share is more a very generic approach of how people can learn things, understand systems, so
mm,
that once you have a holistic understanding of how data science works, what are the caveats, how you should see it,
mhm,
then I think you can adapt a little bit faster to the fast changing environment, because
mm,
maybe you need to use a new tool, but you
mm.
still understand the concept. And I think that is something that I personally think is very fascinating and very interesting and can leverage skills. So then in the end, you're not dependent anymore on a certain tool or a programming language or whatever it is, but you understand how systems work, how you can speed up yourself. And yeah, that's what I'm trying to communicate, trying to spread.
That's awesome. I'll make a quick follow-up question about prompt engineering,
Yeah.
because mainly like the let's say god level of prompt engineering is like you communicating to systems and everything scales, and you're like, so what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's new. It's hot right now. It also enables many people to do or to build great AI systems. So that, first of all, I think with prompt engineering, you suddenly give power to many companies, to many individuals, so that they can build powerful applications. On the other side, I would be a little bit cautious with these systems, because I think it still needs a lot of training and understanding of how these systems work. Maybe not in a sense that people don't know how to build these applications, but how to really use them, how to use them ethically, how to, in the end, really scale them. That
Mm,
I think, again, here, learning the tool is straightforward and might change over the time, but
mm.
understanding how to evaluate your LLM in the end, or how to ensure that the output is correct, all of that is more, again, a holistic approach, which needs to be learned and needs time.
Awesome. Agreed, totally. And as you made as you share your vision, you mentioned you have been growing in the field for some time, and I think it could be very interesting if you could share with us a bit of a retrospective
Mhm.
from your studies to your role today, like the peak moments, and how you've been evolving and how you have seen this field evolved, like you mentioned before.
Yeah, definitely. So starting at the time of my bachelor's, I started with a sports management bachelor. So
Mm,
that is obviously not related to data science at all. But back then, I thought, okay, this is what I'm good at. This is what I like, and that's why I should study it.
Mm.
After my or during my studies, I noticed, okay, the management part interests me a bit more than the sports part. So after university, I started my first job in a Berlin-based startup
Mm.
that was more in the food and retail industry. And this startup was very data-driven, or at least what I thought is data-driven back in the days. Now I would see it a bit different. But for me, it was mind blowing. I was using complex spreadsheets. I
Mm.
was working a lot with data and analyzing and visualizing data, and that as project manager. So I started there as project manager. I had kind of an analytical role,
Mm.
and I understood that this is what I like doing because pitching a new idea is easier if you have the data to back it up.
Mm.
If you want to kill a product, it's easier to back it up with data. All of that. So I started enjoying the process of working with data, but I also had a really old computer with really big spreadsheets, and that caused my laptop to crash all the time. So I thought, okay, this cannot be the solution.
Mhm.
What can I do to speed up my work streams? How can I be faster and not have to wait 10 minutes until the spreadsheet is loaded? So I thought, okay, we have a database. Let me start with SQL. So I learned a little bit of SQL, query databases, and then I understood, okay, this is also kind of cumbersome at some point because if you have a complex problem to solve,
Mm.
Python might be a bit easier to use. So I started learning Python and
Mm.
did a lot of data analysis with Python. And then step by step figured out, okay, there's also something called machine learning. And with machine learning, you can do the great stuff. You can predict things, which was also something that we needed at that time in our company because we did some kind of sales forecasting.
Mhm.
And then I did my first machine learning projects like I had my normal work week, and on top of that I did my machine learning projects, and I understood this is actually what I want to do.
Mm.
There was then no perspective in my company back then to get a real data science role, so I thought, okay, I have the skills now to start a junior position, and started applying, and in the end got a job at N26, which is an online bank operating mostly in Europe.
Mhm.
And at N26, I started as junior. Later on, was lucky enough to get a promotion to mid-level data scientist, and was kind of in a really banking specific topic, which is
Mhm.
credit and installments and lending products in general. And from a data science perspective, this was not too fancy because it was highly regulated. So we used simple data models, etc.
Mhm.
But from an MLOps perspective, it was incredibly valuable because we had to monitor everything. We had to ensure that the input data and the output data is of high quality, like
Mhm.
so many things that I started to get interested in the MLOps part because it made
Mhm.
my life so much easier. Once we had good MLOps practices in place, my
Mm.
job was so much easier.
Mm.
And then after a while, I decided, okay, the banking industry is a little bit too regulated for me. So I moved to Shopify, e-commerce, less regulated. Shopify is state-of-the-art tech company where I am now basically data scientist for sales and post sales. So we are trying to get new merchants on board. We are trying to make our current merchants as happy as possible. We try to interfere when we see there could be the need for a new product. We try to suggest it with our sales teams, all of that, which is kind of an end-to-end process. So we do analysis, we build data models, we also build machine learning models. And that's basically this balance. And
Mm.
apart from my professional career, I thought at some point at N26, okay, I could also need some academic knowledge because I saw my peers around me who were so strong in statistics or math or the technical part that
Yeah.
I started my master's degree part time, finished it last year in big data and business analytics. So I got some theoretical knowledge on top of that. And with all of that, beginning of this year, I decided, okay, I went to university, I'm doing my job, but I'm also interested in sharing something that I really care about, which is why I started the content creation with a focus on MLOps and
Mm.
ethical AI.
Wow, that's very impressive. I think I have thousands of questions in my
Yeah.
mind right now because it is what I really like from the story that you just shared is the fact that when you reach specific skills, you just understood that you needed to move somewhere else here, somewhere else. Sorry, and and grow and learn more and learn on the go, and through time with experience, you've moved yourself towards what you really wanted to work on, which is fascinating. And also, like, it looks like you're a very passionate person. You have like many projects, all the time playing with things. um, so I think I would phrase it as like you seem to be someone that have a lot of drives. So I think I would like to start asking about that. How do you keep up with everything that's going on, because it is a field that grows very fast, more than ever with the latest news in Gen AI, but mainly. And I mean, I would love to hear about the technology, but as an individual, how do you keep up with such interest in the industry, and how do you keep being interested, building new projects, and being creative with all of that?
That's a very complex question. So obviously, answer to complex questions always it depends. But I think it changed over time. In the very beginning, when I was a junior, I think I was just so curious, and I had the urge that I have to compete with others. So I saw the senior data scientist in our company back then, and I thought, okay, how can I get to a senior level? How can I get their
Mm,
knowledge? So whenever a term, a concept, a technology has been dropped or mentioned, I wrote it down and basically tried to read up on it, tried to do a mini project to code it myself. So the motivation was more, how can I be as good as my colleagues, because they were great, they shared their knowledge, and I was just intrinsically motivated to do all that stuff
mm,
just so that I myself get better.
mm,
Over time, I understood, okay, that it's impossible. I cannot always look up every single concept that someone mentions to me, because in 70% of the cases, it didn't even matter. Like, someone
mm,
mentioned something, I never used that concept, but still spent 2 hours reading up on it. So
mm,
that's I at some point I noticed this is a waste of time for me at some level. So it changed. So then for a really long time, my motivation was to share my knowledge, and through that, I understood where my gaps are. So sometimes, let's say LLMs. I recently was very interested in how can we use LLMs to build applications that have a social impact.
right.
And then I understood, okay, actually, my prompt engineering skills are not that good. So I started reading up on it. It was way more specific and easier to learn. But the
Mm,
motivation was not that I develop a new skill, but more, how can I use my skill to help others?
mm,
And I think that's basically the change over time. Right now, that's more my motivation. How can I build something or share something so that others can benefit from it? Because as data scientists, I think we have very powerful skills. Yeah, and these are the two main motivations I observed over the last
mm.
years.
That's very interesting. Um, so so continuing in this direction of building and sharing content, at what moment did you have this switch where you felt like, all right, I want to build things, I want to share my journey, I know it will make me better, I know it will help other, and you started in the creation part of sharing content. We're going to talk about your playbook, the book that you just wrote and published. um, so what how did you take this switch of
Hmm.
going from I listen things and I research subjects to, okay, I implement those and and I create things to share with people?
Hmm. That's a good question. So I would say it started with a little bit more confidence. So when I moved to Shopify, I became a senior data scientist, which boosted my confidence a lot. And I thought, okay, if I can be a senior level position at Shopify, a company that I think does a great job in terms of data, then I think I did a few things right in my life. On top of that, I had many, I don't know, you can call them mentoring chats with junior data scientists or people who want to get into the field. And I understood, okay, there's so many questions. People don't know where to start. People don't know what to do, what to focus on,
Mm,
that again, I got a little more confident that I have some knowledge that other people can benefit from.
Mm.
And then at some point I thought, okay, I'm working full time for a company, but I also have some kind of entrepreneurial interest or a mini fire in me. So I
Mm.
want to do something with a low investment, but that could still be my brand. And the easiest thing is to just, I don't know, post on social media, right? Because
Mm.
like people know your name, they might know your product, they recognize you for something you're specialized in. And then I took an online class how to basically work on LinkedIn, how to post on LinkedIn, how to create content,
Mm.
and specified in an area that I was passionate about, which is MLOps and ethical AI.
Mm.
And that's how it started. So it was basically initiated by a certain confidence that I reached a point where I can share actual knowledge, that I've seen stuff, and I think even though I'm not like the best engineer in the world or the best business stakeholder in the world, I
Mm.
still think there are always a few things you can learn from someone else. And even though if someone reads 10 of my posts and only two are interesting to them, it's still two posts with knowledge that they faced. And that's
Right.
why I started this paired with the interest of having my own brand.
Hmm. Awesome. I like what you mentioned, and I think this is something that we can take to a more extreme level, which is, for example, if I post on LinkedIn and no one see my posts, but one post allows someone to get a job.
Yeah,
That's so powerful. Uh,
definitely.
and yeah, and I think time is also a great way to value the return of what I'm creating, and not
Definitely.
necessarily specific metrics such as interactions on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Um, Super interesting. Can you share a bit about the playbook that you wrote and that you published quite recently? Can you
hmm
share about the process, like what are the main insights, and why did you start writing this playbook?
Yeah. So the playbook is called From Data to Deployment. And what it does, it aims to provide a framework for data science team on how to ship ML models quickly. Because I've been with N26 for almost 3 years. It was a company that went through hyper growth. So our team grew, the company grew, processes were a mess, obviously. And I thought,
Mm.
okay, yeah, this is just a scale up that didn't really find their processes yet, which is why shipping things took long. Like it took a while for such a small company in such a state. I sometimes thought, okay, we're too slow. We have to speed it up.
Mm.
Then I looked from my project to my colleagues' project, and it was set up completely different. So whenever I looked at their project, it took me half a day to understand what they're actually doing and where to find the relevant resources.
Mm.
If we would have had the same structure, that would have been way, way faster, for example. Okay, so I then thought I go to Shopify, big company, probably they figured it out, they know how to do. And I understood actually it's a bit better, but also messy at some points. And then I realized, okay, maybe this is just what it is. Maybe there is no real company or very few companies that have these processes in place.
Mm.
There are companies that still ship fast. Shopify, for example, I think we ship so fast, and that's one of the main advantages. But it also comes at a cost, probably. So the intention of that playbook is to give a framework, and that is very generic. So it's
Mm.
more for advanced data scientists. So nobody who starts with data science should read it. It's not really technical. It's more concepts that I explain, and basically a step-by-step guide of what to execute. And with that framework, ideally, so I also provided a big checklist. Ideally, someone
Mm.
takes this checklist and just looks at it and says, hey, this is relevant for us. We keep it. This is not relevant for us. We scratch it, so
Mm.
that they have in the end a condensed checklist of steps they can perform. And it's a system. So they can repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And by that, you do not forget important steps, but at the
Mhm.
same time, you work very detailed and you can ship a little bit faster.
Mm.
And that is the idea. So with every step in this playbook, I also have a section which explains how it should be done, what are certain approaches.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is that people just integrate it into every project. And when they develop a new project, they start from scratch, check all the points, and ship it. If they just do a second version of it, they start somewhere in the middle, check all the boxes, and ship it. And with that, I think standardized ML life cycles, so having this process in place, helps companies ship faster. And I personally believe that companies that ship faster learn faster and just move faster than their competitors.
Mm, I see. I have two main questions in my mind right now. The first one is, so when we discuss about machine learning engineer, uh, I always find myself like if I share or speak with someone that is a data engineer or someone that is a software engineer, or someone that is a machine learning engineer, I feel like all those three roles have some kind of software engineer parts. A data scientist, I would say, not all the times, not necessarily. Even though sometimes there is this famous meme, I think it's the correct way to say meme, but like where you go for a data science path and then you arrive in a companies that have no
Yeah.
that doesn't have the infrastructure, and so basically there is this bridge that just go to hell, and you find yourself being a data engineer. But coming back to that, how what are the main skills that a data scientist needs to enhance to go on a machine learning engineer path? And
Hmm.
would you say that it is kind of hybrid between data engineer, data science, or software engineer, data science? Like, how do you see, as of today, a machine learning engineer and the skill sets that allows him or her or they to 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 be successful?
Yeah. I think that is heavily dependent on the company because we at Shopify, for example, we have a data development team that helps us like building like internal tools that
Mm,
we can use. So my experience now is a very different one than back at N26 because back at N26 I was doing my Docker files, for example, myself. I was containerizing things. I
mm-hmm,
was sending things to Kafka and to the streaming infrastructure and all of that. Whereas now I don't have to take care of that.
mm,
But what I think generally is very important for an ML engineer is to understand how a software engineer would design an end-to-end process. I think software engineering is very strong with this regard. As data scientists, you like thinking about holistic systems and full systems comes very late in your career. I think in the beginning you're working with modeling, training,
mm,
pre-processing, evaluating, all of that, which is just a little like one small step in the entire pipeline. So I think making this transition from, okay, I only focus on really the data and my ML model to how does the entire system look like? Where does the data come from? How frequent does it come from?
mm,
Or like, how frequent do we get it? How frequently do we have to provide it to
mm,
someone? In what format? All of that, I think it doesn't have to be covered by a junior. It might be covered by a mid-level data scientist, but I think this transition towards, okay, we are going more the ML engineer direction, in my view, can happen a little later. Doesn't have to, but if it happens later, that's completely fine because you have to
mm,
lay a foundation first. So again, I think here there are a few tools you should know, like I don't know, Docker, Python, SQL, obviously, and then from there you should think more like a software engineer and how to design these applications.
mm. Awesome, very interesting. Um, and so, if we go back to the data science part, so now that we have kind of the overall system,
Hmm.
and I feel like you've provided a lot of value on like seeing better the whole picture.
Hmm.
Could you share an example, maybe, of an experience that you had? Um, and so, I think what I would like to ask you about, if that's something I could ask you about, is how do you go about measuring and defining um, let's speak about a shipping project, but it can be anything, any use case, any side project. But how do you define metrics that will allow you to both analyze your system and analyze your intended goal in
Mm-hmm.
terms of business, saving costs, etc.? How do you go about, like, you have the technical part, but you also have those metrics that you go on define both for the system and for
Mm-hmm.
the business KPIs.
Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting topic in my view, because I think, and that's why I mentioned AI systems or ML systems so many times now. I think building good models
Hmm.
became way easier over time. We have scikit-learn, you pass some clean data, you fit a model, and you are already good to go. So I think the skill set of really developing crazy models
Hmm.
is changing over time. I think that's not, or most likely not, the main focus of a data scientist right now. It's more getting clean data and creating value, but
Hmm.
modeling itself became secondary in my view. So how we do it at Shopify, for example, and I think that's the right way to go, is we do something called opportunity scoping. So
Mhm.
we want to understand, what opportunity do we see here when we, I don't know, let's say we build an ML model to increase product adoption. I think that's the easiest example.
Mhm.
We think about different scenarios. So what would happen if we improve our model by an ROC score of zero, like we improve it by 0.1, what
Mhm.
impact would it have on the business? What impact would it have if we increase our ROC score by 0.15? So we have different scenarios, and then estimate how much, I don't know, revenue, traffic, adoption we would create with that. We write it down and create a full doc out of it. So we summarize, what is the problem we want to solve? What's the background? What
Mm.
is the opportunity we see here? What is
Mhm.
our current solution, and why is our proposed solution better? What are risks that we're facing? So with
Mhm.
that, we start with a document that is for all stakeholders. So we can share it with the business, we can share it with technical stakeholders. And in that doc, we also define, before we even code the first line, we define what are the evaluation metrics. So we have statistical metrics, let's say our ROC in that case, or accuracy, or F1, whatever. It could be latency as well. Okay, we want to we want to be faster because our latency is too high. And then on the other side, also, what is our business metrics that we want to evaluate on?
Mhm.
And all of that gets signed off by all the stakeholders that are relevant to the project. And only
Mm.
then we start developing it, because then we are sure we know what to optimize for.
Mhm.
And from there, we basically start the project and try to optimize for these metrics that we aligned on. And that can vary, right? That can vary depending on what we want to improve. It could be cutting costs, it could be improving conversion rates, whatever.
Mm. Mhm. I see. Um, I think following up on this specific example, I have two main questions. I think I like having two questions at the same time. But the first one is, um, when you have a pool of possibilities
Hmm.
of like infinite projects that could optimize, do you go and pick like the five top of minds that feels like they could be the best, and then you kind of start thinking in a data driven way about each one, and you write the entire form about the one that seems the most relevant to you? Or how do you go about, at the genius of the project, choosing, okay, I'm going to write a full doc on this because this is what seems to me as the most valuable project I could be working on right now?
Hmm. That's very good. So sometimes I think these projects, like let's say we work on a product, and we have two or three different things that we want to optimize on. I don't know. We
Hmm.
want to improve conversion. We want to reduce costs. Whatever. Um, Often these decisions come from the business side. So often it's not even our call. Someone comes to us and says, "Okay, you know what? We did our KPI planning or OKR planning for next year, and we want to push this product because it's very profitable.
Hmm.
What do we do then? So what does first we clarify, what does we push this product even mean? And that means increasing adoption. So we translate this business statement into a data problem. So
Mm.
pushing the product means high increasing adoption rate. How do we increase adoption rate? Better model, for example. So that is a really easy way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
This is one way how we kick off these projects. The other one is obviously that we dig into data and we identify opportunities. Let's say we have a model that tries to increase the adoption rate for a certain product, but in a data analysis, we see that this model performs really well in one region or one country, but it's really bad in another country. So we could
Mm-hmm.
suggest, okay, let's do two separate models for two
Mm.
separate regions or so. So there are these two options, and all comes down to the overall strategy and how these projects contribute to it. If we, for example, pitch something that has a higher impact in terms of revenue or conversion rate, for example, it might be that primarily prioritized projects get deprioritized because we identified a bigger opportunity. And I would say at Shopify, we're really good at prioritizing. So these are basically the ways we're trying to look for through the opportunities we identified in a project. Does
Hmm.
that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. It does. And so, following up with my second question, like I mentioned, because they come by two. Um, so now we know how you go about prioritizing. Um, so, from based from your role, I would assume that you have teams
Mm-hmm.
that works with you for you. So once you prioritize and you have this vision and you need to get the job down, now it's let's go time. Um, my question would be, how do you most like to work in terms of managing your time, both with your teams and with, let's say, a more executive layer of the
Mm-hmm.
company? Like, how do you go about, like, your favorite way to work around things, and like scheduling with your teams and so on? Like, do you have practices to manage that, to be efficient, to be like to adapt based on who likes to work, like how everyone works the best? Do you have some comments, notes, reflections, and tips
Mm-hmm.
around that?
Yeah. So I think the part that is probably the most annoying part and also the most time consuming part is stakeholder
Hmm.
management and stakeholder communication. So what we're trying to do is to manage this as good as possible with as few interactions as possible. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why we, for example, write this document that I just described. Because if someone hears about that project, they don't have to contact us, schedule a 30-minute meeting in which we explain it, but we can just send them a link
Mm.
and they have all the information there. Ideally, there are also Slack channels or other ways of communicating where we write updates once a week.
Mm.
So
Mm.
if someone is, in theory, interested in our project or is a stakeholder, they do not have to contact us because they have
Mm.
all the information in this initial doc and get weekly updates.
Mm-hmm.
And these updates are ideally very detailed, very, very informative. So
Mm-hmm.
by that, you exclude all the stakeholder management while still doing stakeholder management, but you don't have to act like connect to thousands of people. You just write one message in a Slack channel, for example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a very big foundation we have because then we can focus on our actual work and can do it without being distracted. And with the data work, I personally just like in a team, you obviously know who likes what, who is good at what. And I like to distribute it like that. So if someone is really interested in data insights, they can do the data insights. They can build the training data set. I sometimes I'm not that much interested in building training data sets, for example,
Mm-hmm.
because I like more the part after trained model and monitoring, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But we know all of that. So we divide the tasks. We say, okay, hey, you own the first part of the pipeline, maybe saying data analysis and the training data. Then we can evaluate the model together and I deploy it then in the end
Mm.
so that we have clear responsibilities and we check in regularly. We're trying to avoid as many meetings as possible. So it's often just a Slack channel
Mm-hmm.
with my team that I work closely with, we
Mhm.
update each other on a daily basis. So beginning or end of the day, we're saying, okay, this and this. And if there are blockers, we might have a meeting or a pair programming session. But I
Hmm.
think clear responsibilities and giving people the tasks they like to do or they are interested to learn, I think
Mhm.
that's where people and teams really thrive.
Hmm. I see. Do you find sometimes speaking to more junior profiles, and maybe they like you see a potential growth in a specific part of the pipeline that they haven't been around, and so you would do some recommendations of, all right, I know that you really like that, but maybe on this one you should try to do something else. Like, how do you go? Because you mentioned earlier in this episode that you also from some time now you've been mentoring and helping people entering the field. So um, do you sometimes push maybe some more junior profile to go a bit out of their comfort zone, or do you have any, like, maybe some tips about some junior profiles that could be helpful in getting started and not staying at doing one specific thing?
Yeah, definitely. How I like personally, how I like to approach it, and I
Hmm.
think also I might have a good experience with like working with others together is to start with one topic. I don't know, the topic this person is interested the most, maybe because then they're excited, they give their best, and let them do that. It could be one task or it could be two tasks or two times similar tasks. Like let's
Hmm.
say building a training data set, right?
Hmm.
So I'll let them do it once. They like doing it. I'll let them do it twice. So they also get a boost in confidence. They think they can do it. They are happy. And then from there, taking them to a next task where they might not know what to do. Let, let's say, I don't know, modeling and evaluating an ML model. So they are very strong in building the training data set and doing the previous analysis,
Hmm.
but they have no clue what model to choose, how to train hyperparameter tuning, how to evaluate the model, how
Mm,
to translate the outcome into a business. So it might be a little bit
mhm,
overwhelming, but they still are so familiar with the initial data that they have some kind of confidence to carry over into the new tasks.
mm,
And then what I do is I have a kickoff meeting for the new tasks in general, where I let them communicate their initial thoughts in the very beginning. So they explain me what I think is very beneficial and what should be done. And then I give my feedback. And then it's kind of an open exchange so that they have a starting point. Even though they haven't done this before, they might have a starting point. And then I'm just trying to check in every day. Hey, how did it go today? Do you need anything? Can I unblock you? And if
mm,
they say, no, 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 all good, I'm fine. And if they then at some point need something, I prefer pair programmings because I personally think that when I explain things in person, I explain it better than when I write a Slack message. And
mm,
that's the way of communication I figured out for myself, for example. But
mhm,
yeah, I definitely think let people start where they're interested in, let them do their job like in a good way, and
mhm,
then give them something new so they grow. And maybe in the end they like the first task
mhm,
more and they can go back to it, but that's how I
mhm.
would approach it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. Uh, I also have another pair of questions, but the first one
Yeah.
is more a comment on what you mentioned. I really believe that um, I really like the idea of like having almost like the minimum meetings, as
Hmm.
little meetings as possible. And that is awesome. And I believe that using, I don't know, using Gen AI, we'll be able to build amazing tools. Let's say we update on Slack, but we still have to have some meetings with management and executive and so on.
Hmm.
So we would just need to record each meetings and just get the transcripts, and based on that we can build a model that happens new meetings through time
Hmm.
with all the time codes and so on, and it enables someone that have no ideas to like get references of specific parts of the project where things were said by someone, and like all these um more um, time consuming things where people need to know where this is or what have been said and so on. And I really believe that this is a great example of enhancing LLMs and chatbots based on this specific data. And it can also enhance the time saving so that we can
Yeah,
focus on the fun things and cool things and important things. Do
yeah.
you want to react a bit on chatbots in leveraging LLMs and so on?
Yeah, I think what you just described is what Microsoft is doing right now. So they are building a product. They have a great product demonstration of what they're planning to do. I forgot the name. I think it's Microsoft 365 or so, where they integrate all their products they have with GPT models. So that means there is a transcript that is then in the end, or like a meeting from there, a transcript from there, a meeting summary, next actions, and the next actions are also scheduled in calendars. And I
Mm,
think obviously generative AI has many advantages, but I think the first and probably most powerful advantage is that it could make these tasks that we all hate to do redundant. So I don't know, summarizing things, writing actions down. I don't know, copywriting, for example. When I write important text or an important doc, I let it double check by ChatGPT for I don't know better wording or grammar. And I think all these annoying tasks that are time consuming, but do not directly contribute to our output can be speed up
mm,
with LLMs. Obviously, on top of that, there are so many other applications.
mhm,
But I think the thing that we can already do really well without being concerned that ethical standards are not met or that systems fail for whatever reason, I think these organizational tasks they can be so powerful.
mm. Yeah, yeah. I was just putting it even more in my head. There
Yeah,
is in Canva this like you can connect to these APIs of like you put a voice and someone is presenting a Canva like an AI,
yeah, hmm,
like an
yeah,
avatar is presenting the presentation with a voice and so on. And so if you jump one step further and you connect it to augmented reality, then you can like
yeah,
onboard people on an amazing level with like amazing information with like almost like avatars that you
yeah,
can like they're your counselor and you can ask them anything about the companies and they will give you the best answer because when in a company like you ask to someone but this person have a limited scope on their
yeah,
vision, and so all the accessible information can be retrieved and you can enhance all of that in an amazing UI experience. And yeah, I
yeah.
was
I,
just
I agree.
I just wanted to push it very hard because I believe that we'll be able to see crazy things, and it's fun.
Yeah.
um so all right, so that was the first part. So now coming back to the second part, you mentioned multiple things that I would like to capture. So you've mentioned how you worked with your teams. You mentioned how you like to grow in an environment. um, You've mentioned your book. You've mentioned your passion to teach to people. You've mentioned how you would go about like more junior profiles to grow and get out of their comfort zone. I would love to ask you about what tips, and this is related to your book, to your playbook about going into production, like the full pipeline, ML engineer. What are like the main things advanced data scientists or advanced machine learning engineer needs to work on, and how do you yourself keep up with improving and growing?
Hmm. So I think there are two parts seniors and head offs should take care of. So one is especially like the higher in the hierarchy, the more important is it to shield your team from external requests so that they can actually do their job. I think that's more head off level. But if we're talking about senior data scientists, I think it's important to have processes and framework in place to guarantee high quality output every single time you start a new project. I think that's where seniors should have a big impact because they have the knowledge of what is good output, how to achieve it, and they also have the seniority of scaling this to the entire team. So that's also what I'm trying to do with my book. I think especially focus on the part before modeling, so like clarifying requirements, like what do our stakeholders actually want, actively listening to them when they say we want to push a product, what does that mean for them and how do we measure it, drill it down, write it down, and lay the foundation. Then I think, I don't know, the entire modeling process, getting the data, cleaning the data, modeling, etc., is junior to mid level data science levels. I think that's very fair to do. And then the evaluation becomes again really important, in my view, because I think there you translate your statistical insights into business value. And what does this business value mean? And again, I think here you see someone on a mid level compared to someone on a senior level compared to someone on a head of level, and maybe also having a vision to what does this statistical impact and this business impact mean in the long term, and what opportunities do we see here in the future.
Hmm.
And that I think are the most important parts. So not really anymore the technical aspects, obviously
Hmm.
giving feedback in terms of how to structure your code, how to set up the system. Yeah, I get that. But the communication with stakeholders and generating value, I think that's where seniors contribute the most or can contribute the most.
Hmm.
And for that, so that all the other processes, the technical processes work really well, I think having a standardized process or a framework
Hmm.
helps so much, because your team does know what to do, in what format, and what output is required, so
Hmm.
that as a senior, you just look at it and you exactly know where to look at and how it's been evaluated.
Hmm. Awesome. And the fact that you've wrote this playground book must give you some strong credibility around your teams, because you can always reference yourself. Like
Yeah,
you can even put a chatbot on top of your book, and
yeah,
like
yeah,
if you want to ask me, ask the chatbot, because it's the same. It's the same
yeah,
guy. You're
yeah,
going to, and I'm going to look at my book to answer you the best way. So maybe that could be
yeah.
a fun thing to deploy chatbots on open source content.
Yeah, that's a good aspect.
Um, so I understand. I totally understand, and this is why I would also like to ask you. And this is a very important topic, and sometimes I believe that people feel that they have it control until they see that they don't, or not as much as they would expect. And now, big suspense around what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about like communication with stakeholders.
Hmm.
When you're a tech person, when you've spent so much time trying to figure out the concepts yourself, and you have everything going, and you're like rushed, but now you see that you have a meeting with stakeholders that pop-ups, and you're like, oh right, I have this meeting, but you're like full machine learning concept, like this architecture is not working, we're having this error, I'm investing over there. But now you're in the stakeholder meeting, and you need to communicate results, and you need to communicate it in a language that they understand, so that
Hmm.
you first look wise in terms of, okay, this is going on, we're taking this action, this is why it makes sense, and so on. But you need to totally abstract from your rush of like
Hmm.
technical jargon and so on, which can result in a very hard exercise, I guess. What do you have to say about that? Do you have any tips? How do you learn to talk about with stakeholders about
Hmm.
metrics, concepts, technology, and so on?
Yeah. I think there are a few things that stakeholders should know, a few things they shouldn't care about. If I use
Mm.
a XGBoost or logistic regression, I would just confuse them with technical terms like that. And
Mm.
that is something I think you just learn by talking to stakeholders. Some are
Mhm.
really technical. At N26, I had one colleague who, like, he knew everything about data science, so that was really easy to talk to him. But in
Mhm.
general, I understood over the time that, like, really technical terms I don't even talk about. If
Mhm.
you work for a while in a team, so let's say you're, as data scientist, you're embedded into a product team and you are always working on the same product, I think then it comes naturally that you learn the business terminology. So you understand, okay, what metrics are important for them,
Mhm.
how can I communicate it, how, like, how many tech details they want to know. And I think, as I said, over time, it develops naturally.
Mm-hmm.
But what always helps is to have a meeting agenda. So we use a tool at Shopify called Fellow. And in Fellow, you can take notes for every meeting. And it's a very nice tool. And usually when someone schedules a meeting, they put in notes before. So even if I just look into Fellow 5 minutes before, I see what the stakeholder is expecting me to communicate. Maybe they just want to know, give me a general update. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
they want to know why are we failing or whatever. And then that is yeah, that's basically very helpful. Just like 2-3 minutes before, knowing what are they expecting. And if I don't know something that is in there, like if I cannot answer a question, we have a good culture at Shopify where we say, okay, you know what, I don't know, but let me get back to you within, I don't know, a day or two, and I'll let you know. And everyone's really happy with that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Awesome. Yeah, I believe that knowing when we're going in a meeting what we need to talk about will also to save a lot of time,
Yeah,
because you will get exactly what you want.
yeah,
I will be brief towards the points that you want to discuss,
yeah,
and everything will be very happy.
yeah.
And that's awesome. Um, so I would like to ask you a bit about side project, but
Hmm.
coming back to the well, first of all, quick question. Did you learn to communicate with stakeholders, maybe like listening some very talented people communicating to stakeholders? Like how how influential does listening to very talented people have impacted yourself on this journey?
A lot. Interestingly, though, I think in terms of communication and listening, I learned more from product managers than from fellow data scientists. I think
Mm,
as product manager, you have an incredible skill set. First of all, I think they're doing a great job. But what they do the best, a good product manager just asks questions all the time. They're
mm,
trying to break down things so that I, as data scientist, understand what the iOS engineer did, but
mhm,
also that, I don't know, person X epsilon understands what data scientists do. And they just, before they say or have an opinion, they ask 10 questions. And I
mm,
think that way of listening a lot and trying to speak the same lingo as
mhm,
the person on the other end,
mhm.
that is something that I learned from business stakeholders actually, and not from data scientists.
Right, I see. Very interesting. All right. I would follow up with the machine learning
Yeah,
aspect.
perfect.
Could you share maybe? Let's put two questions in one. I'm
Hmm.
tricking myself with my
Yeah.
two questions. Could you share maybe a side project, something that that have taught you a lot, and by doing so, like maybe enhance some key machine learning concepts, techniques, like for example, like how do you go about monitoring a specific example, the pipeline, like okay, I'm going to build this model, I'm going to put it live, and then I'm going to come back on this part and I'm going to define the metrics that I want to monitor there. And like, do you have an end-to-end side project or use case in one of your previous roles, experiences, whether it's at Shopify or not, that could result in providing a lot of value to the people who are listening, because by doing so we'll hear about you
Yeah.
communicating specific concepts, but also learn about ML in general and like key technologies. Could that be something possible?
Yeah, so I would take one of the projects I had in my previous company, N26, because I think that's a prime example for that.
Mm.
Because again, banking industry very heavily regulated. So
Hmm.
what we did, we built a new credit model, and we worked very closely with the credit team. So
Hmm.
people from the bank, but we also had a product team and we had our data team.
Mm.
And what we did there is we wanted to understand why is our current model performing as it is and how can we improve it. So in the first place, I thought, okay, great idea. I have this new model. I develop new features and
Hmm.
then it's going to be better. However, what I underestimated is that I created a list of features I want to implement, and half of them were not approved by our compliance team because they could have been discriminating. And that's obviously not possible. I didn't have the knowledge back then. So it was a lot of back and forth with the credit team, with the compliance team.
Right.
Together, we sat together. I told them what is technically possible, and they just threw random ideas at me. They said, okay, we want these features, we want to track this kind of behavior. And then I got back, thought about, okay, how can we translate these expectations into actual data points that we track reliably?
Mm-hmm.
And then again, I went back with a new list of features and a new approach and explained it in a really, really easy way. Luckily, I had the ideas for new data points from the credit risk team. So they knew what I was talking about when I say, I don't know, log in within the last 30 days. They knew what I meant. So there, before even starting to model, I first shared my ideas, got an approval so that we're all on the same side with what I want to do and my approach. From there, I then got the data, built a model, evaluated the model. And before I even think about deploying it, I went back, wrote a Google Doc, which was basically saying, yeah, okay, this is what I want to do. And then I communicated the results and got it approved again. And only after that approval, I said, okay, how important is this? Like when our model fails, how fast do we have to act? Again, I could have made an assumption that I have to act right away, but like before every single step that I took, I double checked with the business stakeholders just to make sure, okay, we're on the same page.
Right. Awesome. And then, so the model was in production, and everyone was happy.
Yeah, it took a few rounds. It was not that straightforward. We had a few iterations, but yeah.
Okay. And so I would assume that you had a follow up a few times in where you were able to see the value of the model and like the main metric that have been defined at the beginning, to like know the value that was generated with this pushing this model. Is that correct?
Exactly. That's correct.
Awesome. So if I understood correctly, so you define and I like how you emphasize how at every step you give your ideas,
Yeah.
you get the questions, you yourself ask questions, then you do something, and you make sure everything is okay.
Yeah.
And then before like doing all the next 10 steps, you just write that down. And if you have any questions like my latency or like how fast do I need to react, you don't assume things, you just like put everything down, just check with them, and move on based on what have been according or revised, and then you just go on with the process of like, okay, I'm going to check based on the metrics that we've defined if this model still makes sense. I would assume that you have specific values in terms of your datasets that are very relevant to this model, so you maybe track them in terms of like if they're continuously integrating in the system, like does this still work perfectly, and does it still make sense? So perfect. I think I could go on forever, but I think we've reached the limit of time. So I would like to ask you two last questions.
Sure.
First one, where can everyone learn more about you? Like, is it LinkedIn, website, your playbook? Where can people find you?
Yeah. So LinkedIn is probably the best point of contact. It's basically just the name, as you can see it here, is Agostino Calamia, and there I post about various things. I have my playbook linked, so you can find it there. You can find my website there. And if you have specific questions, I'm also happy to have a chat. Just drop me a message, and then we can have a talk.
Awesome. And last question, and I want to thank you a lot for coming on the show and sharing all this incredible value. Thanks a lot. Would you have a message for the Let's Talk AI community and everyone who's listening, who's still here with us and learning from you? It can be personal, professional, anything.
I would say that in a fast changing environment like AI, ML, whatever you want to call it, it can be really frustrating to not be able to keep up with the newest trends all the time. So I know that sometimes you don't have the capacity to read up on the new technology, the new paper, but I would say that just getting back to it whenever you have the capacity, or just getting motivated by hobby projects or mentoring others, like just
Mm.
finding something that sparks this energy again is something that I would recommend. And I would just accept that you can never know all the things that are out there.
Awesome. Thanks again, and I wish you to have a wonderful day.
Yeah, thank you so much.